Hi, welcome once again to the Tim Modise Connection. And this is where we talk to people who make things happen in South Africa and give us a sense of who we are and who we can be. And these are people who may be operating in the public sector space, in business, in sports, in the arts, in schools, in healthcare, you name it. As long as they make the country work, then they are my friends and they are your friends as well. And one such person is the Director General of Tourism, Mr. Nkhumeleni Victor Tharage, who is with me to talk about tourism in South Africa. It's Tourism Month after all, and also to talk about the assets that we have as a country on the tourism front, the opportunities that exist there. But he also has got a very interesting biography, personal story to tell on how he got to be where he is. And I think it is fair, Tate Tharage, that we start right there. You are a student, graduate, if you will, of the famous Mbelwe High School, right?
Indeed.
Many people from Limpopo who went to that school went on to achieve great things. So you happen to be one of them. How was school from then to Durban Westville days? Because you are a man of many hats. We can use one title and say DG this, DG that, forgetting that you studied science. At one point you studied management, and you've also worked in the private sector. And just briefly tell me about your academic journey.
The main grounding, I would say, was the village upbringing.
Yeah.
I think I'll give you one example. In 1992, I was fortunate enough to be the runner-up for the National Youth Science Olympiad. And it came with the prize tag was to be able to attend the National Science Week, which was quite insightful, I must say, because they would take us to different places, CSIR, Anglo-American Day, and so they would expose us to a whole number of things and how the world works and all those kinds of things. But the village comes in where there were contributions from villagers to ensure that I have enough money for pocket money going to attend the International Youth Science Fortnight in London. Villagers put together that money, some uncles, some no blood relations. All together, they were able to bring somewhere along, I think it was plus minus 1,500 rands. This was coming from the village.
Yeah.
And the essence of it was that he is a village child who has actually made it to this particular competition. Our village name is also going to be known elsewhere. So that sort of, it takes a village to raise a child notion is the kind of thing that actually carried me through.
Sure.
And through. The transition from high school with all that Science Olympiad and all this and so on to university was very different. So I got there, got entangled in what students do when they are transitioning and so on. So I lost the bursary.
Okay.
So after losing the bursary, Vet says to me, no, wait. You can continue with your studies. You can go into the engineering studies. We don't have a problem. I wanted to study mining engineering at that time. You can go into this. We have no problem with that. But you will have to foot the bill yourself. This was 92 plus minus 52,000 rands. my mother, who really has been serious, pillar of strength during that particular period, was not going to afford it. She was a teacher, and so, but she was just not going to afford it. I'm not even sure if 52 then was not more than her annual salary.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember.
So there were, and
the average annual salary.
all sorts of activities we were doing on campus at that time. None of it could actually bring us to some sort of fees must fall. No fees fell. So that's when I decided to take a bus to Durban Westville. So I didn't have an application. Got there and had to speak to the different schools and so on, and then got into the science faculty. I had enough money to be able to register for that purpose and so on, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, along the way, I mean, studied science as you did, and environmental studies, and business management, and all of that. But you joined government, and on the strength of what? Of tourism, or on the strength of your environmental studies background?
So this is how it started.
Yeah.
I first joined Statistics South Africa.
Okay.
And I worked for Statistics South Africa, but there was an opportunity to join the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism to be part of the organizing team from both a substance perspective, but also from a logistical perspective for the World Summit in Sustainable Development. And when that opportunity came, I applied for it. There were two things that happened during that particular period that could have actually shifted my focus on that particular opportunity. One was that I had an opportunity. That time, I had an opportunity to join one of the large pharmaceutical companies in the country. I was a young man. They were offering me a BMW 320. They were offering me their petrol card, and they were offering me, some decent allowance in terms of accommodation and all that. So it sort of like made perfect sense financially to pursue something like that. And there was also another company, a well-known company that operates from Limpopo, that is in the construction environment as a supplier of certain type of material. I'm trying not to give its identity. They made an offer. The offer was probably twice or thrice, up to thrice almost, what this environmental affairs and tourism job was offering. And I looked at all these things, and I decided that this is not what I'm going to take. I wanted so much to be part of the World Summit on Sustainable Development. But I also wanted to get into some sense of service, because all these came after I had been in some kind of business environment before, trying on my own after studies to get through and make sure that at least I start something properly and so. And the environment was very difficult, very, very difficult. Not impossible, but it needed, tactically, you needed to really deal with all these aspects of how to get a business to the levels that you really want to keep it.
So let's tourism. I can think that I know what you're talking about, but maybe I'm missing out on something. From your point of view as a Department of Tourism, what do you see, what do you mean when you talk about tourism in the South African context?
It's a very important question, because what comes to mind immediately for someone who's not involved in the business of tourism is about having fun. which is true. It's about having fun. It's about moving from one place to another and go and do certain activities. They could be business related, they could be leisure related and all that. Very important. But this is a big business.
It is?
It's a big business.
Okay. What is the size of the sector? We'll break it down into chunks and so I can better understand.
So let me put it this way. You have a number of subsectors. So we are not one industry. So that's why we use a tourism satellite account. We don't necessarily have so we are not in the industrial classification as this industry. So you will have accommodation, hospitality. You will have your restaurants within that, in the hospitality. You will have your travel. Now, in the travel, you will have your airlines. You will have your
trains and buses and taxis.
All of that. But when they account for it, they do extract what is not tourism in that, because some people will be traveling for other things.
Yes.
So that we don't end up with all sorts of double counting and so on. But it makes more sense if I was to give you certain examples of what it really is, but also the context of taking. So what is government getting involved in here? Because there's also a notion that says, but can't this thing just grow by itself and so on? And government is right at the center of these things. So if you don't have these airports, nobody is going to be able to come here.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. But you go to the airport, you want to have the convenience of getting to access your car to the next place and so on within the airport present. Now that's a trading opportunity that has been facilitated by government to make sure that those private sector owners of those cars are able to bring them on site there.
Sure. I want to probe, if I may, for a moment, the economic impact of the tourism sector. And my key issue whenever I discuss the South African economy for me is how many jobs are being created. I know it's important, people should make money and more investments are needed, but let's start with jobs first and work back to the revenues generated.
I want to make this point because it's you probably would hear us talking about we need to transform this sector.
Yeah.
And people would ask, but what are you saying? Do you want someone who inherited a property and made it a B&B to now sell a part of their B&B to Bratim? And that's not what we are saying. Now, you were in the first council for for tourism. Now, you would recall that part of what was in that not scorecard, what do you call this? The framework. Let me call it the framework. Part of what is in that framework is to say you will partake in the business of providing services to tourism services to government if you have got empowerment credentials. Now, you're talking about roughly before COVID, we were talking about approximately 12 billion rands worth of these services that we are talking about. And I'm simply talking about people moving from point one to B, people who are coming on board in terms of booking your venue and facilities for their meetings and conferences and all those kinds of things, and utilizing your vehicles and so on. 12 billion rands. And we are saying these 12 billion rands, you will be able to access it if you've got empowerment credentials. But you should not access it if you don't have them, because we are building a nation.
Is a 12 billion an incentive?
It is.
It's a fund that exists as an incentive?
No, it's the consumption that...
Okay, that exists already.
As I travel to Cape Town, to Parliament, and go and sleep at that hotel, and hire that vehicle, and eat at that restaurant, all of these three things are actually part of that 12 billion.
Okay.
But we are saying you can't get this part of this unless if you are assisting the country in the transformation project.
Sure.
And that's the context that I wanted to highlight before I come to the other aspects that relate to the impact. What you have is a sector, an industry, a sector broadly, that was employing before COVID 1.5 million.
Which is a substantial number.
That's a substantial number. Yeah. So that's a direct and indirect impact. But it was employing about 700,000 directly.
Yeah.
Directly. Huge number. Of course, there are questions and contestations about whether we are employing more foreign nationals than South Africans and so on. And I think that's something that we are working on in terms of making sure that the determinations within the sector are favorable to South Africans. And that is on the basis of the Tourism Act, because it talks about benefits to the citizens.
Yeah. So, but the opportunities, I'm sure, are plenty in the tourism sector, notwithstanding the setback of the past 2 years as a result of COVID, I'd like to believe. I'm thinking of a lot of young South Africans who are unemployed currently. Some are graduates and some have obtained matric, but they are always looking out for new opportunities. And barriers to entry are not that heavy, I'd like to believe, in the tourism sector. What would you say to a young person who wants to break into tourism or has got no idea how to approach entrepreneurship within that sector?
It's hard work. It's very hard work, and hands-on.
Yeah.
And hands-on. So, and it's largely driven by attitude. It's service. So you have to pour that tea.
Yeah.
But before you pour that tea, you have to make that tea. And you must smile. And you must understand that it's a relationship between a client and a service provider. And the client must be happy at the end of the day. So a lot of it will not be about whether the job is there or not.
Yes.
A lot of it is whether I have that inner ability to subject myself to being a servant of someone who I'm supposed to provide a service to.
Yeah.
On the entrepreneurship side, there's plenty of opportunity, but again, it's not quick money. It's not quick money. In some instances, you've got you need large volumes of capital if you are going into bigger, say, accommodation related and so on. Even reasonably bigger restaurants and so on, you would need some capital. But there are things that can be done without that capital. So, for instance, we do train people to become tourist guides, so you can enter through something like that. Some of them, they graduate to become, you would recall, Ntate Joe Bako Soweto. May his soul rest in peace. They graduated to become tour operators, and they were successful in that. But what is crucial is what is it that we are doing to prepare these people in that sort of direction. So
Sure.
we've got funding that we do with the National Empowerment Fund, where you can get up to 5 million rands worth of a grant, depending on the size of the business that you are entering into. But you've got to have a compelling case and so on. We are putting youth who are tech orientated through a process of incubation, and we're doing this in partnership with Science and Innovation. So what they do, they come in, they have their own ideas, very solid ideas, how to solve problems of baggage handling at the airport, such that we don't have all these problems we're seeing. And then they refine within the incubator, they start refining those ideas, and we are hoping that a few IPs are going to come from there. And we do have on the sidelines, we always invite these big funders that are looking for equity opportunity and so on to also be on the sidelines, and they will then be able to assist going forward. And so there are a number of different programs that we are actually pursuing to ensure that aspect of entrepreneurship is indeed catered for, but also the training. We're training thousands of youth.
Now, to you personally, as a person who has a keen interest on sustainability, the environment, and in the context of tourism, of course, but also personal values, what is it that has made you be so interested in matters relating to the environment? What does that mean to you? And what should it mean to us? And it's a loaded question deliberately, because I get a sense that there are people who think that the environment is there to be exploited. It doesn't matter how much of it that you degrade over a period of time. After all, it's there. It's nature gave it to you, so you do as you please with it.
I hear you. There. How do I put this thing? We are not separate from the environment. So you are the environment.
I would think so. Yes. Yeah.
And this is why when we leave the earth, we go into the earth, become part of that environment again.
Yeah.
Now, why am I saying this? Is because if we start removing ourselves and think there is something that is going to be done by us, we are developing, we are what and so, but outside the understanding that it's a give and take relationship, it will create problems for us at a later stage. Now, if we embrace the notion that says we need to do things, I mean, if you look at the extent to which we have consumed resources as the human race over the past, I would say, starting from the beginning of industrial revolution, we have consumed much, much, much more than what all the past generations did. Now, it is important that you had the Rio Summit, you had the Joburg Summit and so on, because they remind us that we must develop. And of course, there's this dichotomy between the level of development of the country, the level of development of the African economies, the level of development of the Western economies, and what we as the African economies aspire to. But the question that comes in is whether we have to mimic the same route that was actually followed by the others. And that's still a bigger question that does not necessarily have, I don't necessarily have a direct answer to. But I do believe that the manner in which we develop going forward must always ensure that there is an aspect of sustainability to it.
Now, tell me, Vic, I mean, to you, what are the qualities that you think help drive you, keep you focused, and keep you committed to doing what you do? I've told you that, to my mind and many other people's minds, I think who've observed you, they would say, you seem to be committed to your work, and we appreciate that you're doing your best to serve the people of South Africa and make contributions to the sustainability debates around the world. We appreciate that. But what is working for you?
It's a tough question. The one thing I know is that I respect every person. It doesn't matter what their perceived status in life is. A human being is a human being. So this. The second thing that I would think does help is you have to always say to yourself, are my hands clean? And am I giving everything to this? So if you take on a task and you're saying you're going to do it, you must do it. And you must not have a half-hearted approach to it. There's just to quote this, a statement made by Professor Marwara, I think about a month ago or so, which I found quite profound. I thought, this is it. And he said, anyone who's lazy must not lead. So it doesn't matter what you've been given. I was talking to Dalitambo the other day, and he was telling me his own story about his father, President OR of the ANC, saying to him, Dali, what is it that you want to do? And he was still young at that time, and he says to me, no, I told him, I want to be an artist. And he says when he was saying that, he was a bit worried because his father, he studied science, he studied law and so on. And he thought maybe he would want him to, or even to follow his own political career and so on. And he looked at him and he said, that's good, you know what you want to do, but what you choose, you must be the best of that thing that you do.
Yeah.
So you can't be the best of anything. It's not possible. You can't be the best of anything when you want to take from it and not necessarily give your all to it. So let me give an example with yourself, Pratim. We have observed you, and we are proud of what you're doing. So we see Pratim, the journalist. And this is similar to what you were saying about the relationship, our relationship with the environment. So Pratim gave to journalism extensively, and he threw himself deep into it. So journalism then made Tim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's how it works.
Yeah.
There's no other way.
Yes.
So you have to then be fully immersed in what you're doing, and somehow, knowledge rubs off. So you would come to a point where people will notice what you're doing and your work ethic and everything else. Then you start having engagements with this one, with that one, and then you start getting to understand these things better, and then you improve in what you're doing, and that's how.
Well, what's your parting shot, in brief? Because we're going through a difficult time in the country on so many fronts, faced with so many problems, and deliberately I did not talk about them. They're never ending. We're likely to talk forever talking about it. But what is your parting shot to your own people, your society, what do you see on the horizon? What can we do to improve our situation, basically?
You know, just like building a house, you got to put a brick after another, a brick after another. And then one day we then see that, okay, there is something emerging. So there's this, you probably know about this, I'll bore you with it again. But there's this view that, this story about this person who goes to a construction site and asks the first person, what's going on here? And the guy says, no, I'm building a wall. I'm laying bricks. Next person says, but what is this? And then somebody says, no, it's a house. And then they went to another person who said, no, this is a new home for so-and-so. Now, the South Africa we want is dependent on Tim's contribution, on Victor's contribution, on Thabang's contribution, on Mapula's contribution. It's not on one person. It's not on a few people. It is all of us. It is the South Africa that has a motorist who does not open the window and throw a can of whichever restaurant they bought, whatever that drink is. It is the South Africa of people who do not drink and drive. It is the South Africa of men that protect children. It is the same South Africa that when all of the things that I've just raised are working in that particular manner, would be able to also look after us who look after it. So there are different things that we've got to do and make sure. But I mean, if I'll give you a typical example. If you look at all these social media things that we see about the theft of infrastructure, cables here, the rail tracks here and so on, that all this vandalism and so on. And we sit somewhere and we say, this is the job of the police. And we know it's last week we had this guy who was in a meeting with us, and he was saying to us, we were talking about, how do we improve things in the townships for the purposes of growing tourism. He says, but it's Brazet, and Brazet is known by everybody else.
To be the person destroying
the
infrastructure. And, yeah.
So Brazet is known by everybody else to be doing this thing. But at the end of the day, we are the same people who actually complain that which was meant to be brought by that infrastructure is not there. So I'm saying we do need, as a country, we do need some degree of patriotism. Each one of us bringing that level of patriotism will ensure that we are actually going to build the South Africa we want. It is not for politicians. Politicians will be there, and our system of making sure that the democracy is maintained will need politicians. That's important, and it should happen. But every single one of the 60 million South Africans has a responsibility. Make sure that your children are going to school. The school is next door. The school has the facilities and so on, but the child says, I'm not going to go there. Make sure that that child does not ban the school when the cell phones are taken away from them so that they could actually focus on things in the classroom. So there are aspects that we must deal with as parents. There are values we must instill in our children. Then there's responsibilities that government will take care of. You will still have one or two elements and those are the ones that the police must then be attending to.
Sure.
But it can be that the larger volume within the society then begins to skew towards that, because then you end up with an environment that
Ultimately
that is not
become a
conducive.
police state then. If you can't look after yourself and you always say police must do this, ultimately, if you give them more resources, we may as well defer to them. I agree with you. But thanks again, Vic, for spending time with me and sharing ideas. I know our conversations can go on, and there's so much I wanted to ask you, but I appreciate that you featured on the Tim Modise connection. Thank you, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much.